Today, I want to talk about the best way to improve at fighting games, which is, of course, going to be about problem solving. Problem solving is a universally important skill in pretty much anything in life, and fighting games are no exception to that. However, fighting games are very fast paced, and something that's very unique about them is that pretty much at any given point in time, you have almost all of your options available to you in any given situation. And they really leave it up to the players to be able to kind of decide what the best tool is for any given moment, which can make problem solving particularly difficult. So I actually want to talk about ways that you can simplify this process of problem solving. And I also want to talk about how we can use replays and training mode to help us accomplish that. Now, the first step to problem solving is going to sound kind of obvious. The first thing you need to be able to do is actually be able to identify what the problem is that you're having in the first place. I know that sounds kind of redundant or almost kind of funny, but it is something that a lot of players often overlook, I've noticed. Many players over the years have told me that they struggle to improve or don't really understand what they need to improve on, and most of the time what I've realized is that they don't even really understand what it is that they need to be fixing to begin with. I personally like to think about fighting games kind of like putting together a puzzle. When you're putting together a puzzle in real life, you want to kind of put the edges together first, because that's going to allow you to fill in the rest of the puzzle easier. The proverbial frame of the puzzle in this case being, of course, the problem that you need to solve. Figuring out the problem that you need to solve is the edge of the puzzle, and then it is much easier to fill it in once you understand what that is. And going further with the puzzle analogy, stuff like training mode and watching your replays are kind of the tools we use to put that puzzle together. So how do you go about identifying what your problem even is in the first place? I'm going to give you one simple trick that's going to sound kind of funny when I say it, but it is a very, very helpful trick. Go into your replays, watch your matches, and ask yourself this one question. What are you getting hit by? Seriously, it sounds super simple, but so many people don't realize that this is such an effective way to understand what problems you're even having. Identifying what is causing you to take damage is going to be very beneficial. I know a lot of players don't even review their own matches, or if they do, they don't even really understand what they should be looking for, which is understandable. But here's the thing when it comes to problem solving. You want to ask questions. Whether you're asking yourself questions or asking something that's helping you, asking questions is going to get you to a solution much faster. The more questions you ask, the more chances you're giving yourself of identifying the problem, identifying solutions. The more questions you ask, the better you get at being able to figure out what are good questions to ask, right? I know a lot of players get kind of hung up on the idea of like, oh, is this a good question to ask? Is this a good question to ask? The more you ask, the more you're going to get better at being able to ask those good questions. You have to start somewhere. So yeah, it really is as simple as, go into your replays and ask yourself the questions like, what is hitting me? Why did it hit me? What was I thinking of in that situation? What was my opponent thinking of in that situation? Ask yourself as many questions as you possibly can. And it sounds complex, right? Asking yourself all these questions, it just sounds very daunting, but those are questions that you ask outside of the game, right? When you're playing the game yourself, you kind of already understand those things, ideally anyways. So don't worry about that too much. It's really not that difficult when you're just watching your own replays. Sometimes when it comes to these things, the answer is obvious, right? If you're getting anti-aired a bunch, it's pretty obvious that like, oh, maybe I should stop anti-airing, right? However, sometimes, or oftentimes in fighting games, the answer is not that black and white, and sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box. Maybe it's not just that you're jumping too much and getting anti-aired too much. Maybe you should ask yourself, why are you jumping? What is leading you to jump in that situation? Maybe you need to be jumping from a different spacing or at a different timing. Maybe you need to use a different jump button. There's all sorts of questions you can ask yourself in fighting games, and that's why it's very important to both understand that not all these situations are simple. Being able to think outside the box is very valuable. And it's also important to realize that part of the benefit to asking yourself so many questions is that having multiple answers and multiple possibilities for any given problem is going to be helpful long term. The biggest thing you can look for outside of just, what is hitting you when it comes to trying to identify the problems that you're having is recurring situations. Getting anti-aired once or twice, that's not really a problem, right? This is kind of natural. It's going to happen in a fighting game. Getting anti-aired consistently, very often, that's something you have to kind of consider. Why are you getting anti-aired so often? Fighting games are mostly comprised of many smaller interactions that kind of make up an entire match. Certain key points are going to occur more frequently than others, so knowing those key moments, understanding them, and identifying your problems in those situations will help you a lot. As you go about this process more and more, you start to get better at it. You start being able to more quickly identify what your problems are. You start getting better at the actual problem solving part itself. You start noticing common trends in some of the problems that you have. You start noticing that, oh, hey, you know, I've labbed a situation like this, or I solved a problem that was similar to this before. Maybe I can apply what I learned in that situation. And then you'll notice like, wow, I actually could. So the process can start out kind of difficult, but it's a very useful skill to start working on, because it's kind of something that's just going to benefit you for the entire time that you play fighting games, or frankly, any competitive video game. So if I had to kind of like lay it out, the process of improvement kind of is like a wheel. You play matches usually with specific goals in mind of things that you're trying to work on, and then you think about your matches and you watch your replays and you try to look for those key moments that we're talking about. What are situations that come up all the time? Whether it's just your playstyle that causes them to come up, whether it's matchup interactions, right? Against a character like Mei, for example, a common situation is post-Dolphin. After you block or get hit by Dolphin, what are your options? What can you do? There are situations like that that will come up with all of these characters, and when you start identifying them, it's going to help you pinpoint where maybe your problems are really coming up. Then you go into training mode, or use wikis or YouTube videos, or ask other people help to start figuring out what you can do in those situations. Understanding both your option set and your opponent's option set is very important for that. Yeah, usually this kind of process kind of just starts from like, okay, this is the thing that's giving me problems. You start working from there. After you block Mei's S Dolphin, just think to yourself like, okay, I kept getting hit by blocked S Dolphin into 5k. Go look how you beat that, and then look how she beats you doing the thing they used to beat her 5k. And then you start breaking those situations down and understanding the options at hand for both players. And you start getting ideas of the things that you want to do in those situations. Then you take those things that you've labbed and researched and all of that, and you go play more matches with those specific goals in mind, and then the situation just kind of loops and loops and loops. And you're going to do this for pretty much the entire time you play fighting games. I've been playing fighting games for 7 to 8 years now, and this is still very much what I do. The path to improvement can be very daunting, and trying to figure out how to even get better at these things can be very difficult. I particularly like to stress the value of getting better at your own problem solving, because, well, yes, you know, having other people answer questions for you is fine, right? It's always good to ask people questions and get advice. It's always a fine avenue. But having the skill set yourself to be able to kind of solve your own problems is just something that's so valuable. And the process can seem daunting, but it doesn't really have to be that way. And hopefully after watching this video, you understand a simpler way to go about these things. But again, it's the type of thing that if you put the time in now and you start getting better at this skill now, it's going to save you so much time and effort later on down the road. Of course, if you have any other questions about this topic or anything else fighting game related that you would like me to answer, feel free to ask me down in the comments below. I like helping people. Maybe if you give me a good enough question, I can make a whole nother video out of it. I'd love to do that. If you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing and dropping a like. I'm really trying to grow the YouTube, so I would greatly appreciate it. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.